Okay, welcome back to part 3, everyone. This one focuses on actually getting basic bullet behavior to happen and actually shooting a bullet for the first time. We cover how all that works, mostly just in terms of where we spawn it and how the movement works for the bullet, but also we discuss a more designy type issue, which is how the bullet shoots in terms of the actual gameplay. So button click versus button holding, cooldown times, that sort of thing. So it should be cool. And since you're at part 3, I'm imagining you're actually sticking with the series, so thank you very much. I very much appreciate you. And again, if it's helping you out, check out my Patreon and wishlist Starcross Starcade special on Steam. Okay, just had to do my housekeeping. Anyways, good luck. Okay, real gameplay. Actual things that we can do in the game aside from just moving around and running into things. The first thing we have up is going to be the bullets that the player can shoot. So first we're going to start pretty basic, and then we're going to kind of branch out and talk about how we're going to make a more dynamic system that lets us make crazier kinds of bullets and make different types of guns. But like I said, let's start small. So first, let's make a basic bullet. This is going to be going through a lot of similar stuff that we've already done. So let's just kind of get through it. First, you need to make a sprite for whatever you want your bullet to be. So I'm going to add mine in from another project. Okay, so here I have S blue bullet. It's just a little circle, and each frame of animation is it just kind of like rotating. So whenever it plays, it does that. It's probably not even going to be that noticeable, so whatever. So we want to make sure that we have our bullets have a centered origin, just like this, and you want to make sure your collision mask is appropriate, which mine is not for this. So I'm just going to shrink it to about here. I think that's about right. You can also change the collision mask shape into circles or anything like that, but you can see they mark it here where they say slow next to them. That means that it's a little bit slower for GameMaker to compute collisions with these alternate collision mask shapes. So I think this is pretty good. It won't be much of a noticeable difference from this and the perfect circle slash diamond that we have here. So good. Now let's make the object for it. So right click, create object. I'm going to create O blue bullet and assign it sprite. Let's open up a create event to set some stuff. And this is going to look pretty similar to what we did with our player. So we want a direction for the bullet to move in. We can default it starting at 0. We want a speed for it to move at. I picked 5. You can mess around with this number however you want once we get into testing. And we have an X speed and a Y speed. So that's all we want for now. We eventually want to add a couple more things in, but this is going to serve us just fine for the moment. So now let's go into our step event so we can actually move it. And let's just say this is going to be the code for moving. And we're going to do it exactly the same way we did the player whenever we got its X and Y speeds. Now the good thing about this is the bullet speed is always going to be 5, at least for this bullet. It's just going to keep moving, and the direction is going to be set whenever our player creates it. So we don't have to worry about this either. So we can literally just set the X and Y speed the same way that we did in the player. So X speed equals length dir X of our speed and direction. Same with Y speed. Remember to do length dir Y. That's also of our speed and direction. And then we just have to add our X speed and our Y speed. So yeah, simple as that. So if I were to just place these in our room really quick, so I'm going to highlight my blue bullet and just kind of put them in random places all over the screen. And let's see what happens here. They should all just, fly to the right, because the default direction that they're all facing is 0, which is to the right, and they're all moving. And you can go in here and type in whatever you want to for direction. You could also type in this random 360. With this function, you can just type in any number here, and random will return any number that is 360 degrees down to 0. So let's see that real quick. Yep, look at that. All just in totally random places. So that's how we know that the actual bullet itself is working. So cool, we can set that back to 0 as default. We know it's moving, and one thing that we said we wanted to do, right, was we want to have a collision for these, and this is where we can now use our solid wall. So if you remember in our player, we would do like if place meeting X plus X speed of Y, and then, we would, in this case, we would say solid wall, then we turn our X speed to 0, and then we would do it the same for the Y for the player, but it's actually not what we want to do this time. With the bullet objects, we actually want the bullet to hit something. And remember, this is like a predictive collision. It says, if I were to add my X speed right now and I would hit a wall, then let's make me stop. So actually what we want to do is, instead of checking before we're going to run into something and preventing it, we are going to check after we've moved and if we did in fact run into something. So we're going to check after we've moved and we're going to check our current coordinates. And instead of just stopping ourselves, we are going to destroy ourselves. So we're going to call the function instance destroy, which gets rid of us. And you'll see the reason that we kind of want to do all this. One, because this means we have one less place meeting check. We're not checking for an X and then we're checking for a Y as well. We're only checking one time, which is a little bit more beneficial. But also, we need to make sure that our bullets only destroy themselves after they've come into contact with things, because we need those other things to know that they were touched by a bullet, right? Like an enemy needs to know it was actually touched by one, so that way it can take damage. We're going to get a little bit more into having the bullets destroy themselves and stuff like that, because it's going to get a little bit more complicated. However, for now, this is going to be totally fine. So what we should see here is, if I move some of these around, I'm going to move a bunch in this line. So remember, we're only checking for the solid wall. So all the ones that hit the red walls will get destroyed, but all the ones that are going to hit these yellow ones are just going to go right over them, or right through them. Let's try that again. Yeah, look at that. You see, they all ran into that wall right there. Yep. Okay, nice. So we got our wall system working totally fine. Our first basic bullet is working, and now we just need to actually fire it. So I'm going to get rid of all the bullets in this room. One cool way you can do that is go into the little instance layer properties here, and it shows you everything that's in the room. And you can see while I'm highlighting random ones, it's hopping around. You can highlight everything in here. So I'm going to highlight this first one and then hold shift, highlight the bottom one. So now all the bullets are selected, and then I'm just going to delete them. It's a little hack for you, little speed running trick. Right. Anyways, so pretty much our bullets are fine. Now let's work out having the player actually shoot them. So let's open up our player again, go to our create event, because it's time to do a little bit more of that stuff, a little bit more setting up. So let's create a new group under our sprite control, and I'm going to call this weapon info. So soon enough, we're going to actually want to make it to where we can use and swap between multiple weapons, right? We don't just want to use the one for the entire time. So for now, we're just going to add a couple simple things. First, let's go ahead and store the object that we actually want to use as a bullet. So let's create a variable called bullet object like this, and we'll just set it equal to O blue bullet. You know what? Let's just start with that. Let's get the code for actually shooting down first. So the first thing we want to do is we need to add a new input, right? We need a shooty button. So I'm just going to go the left mouse button, which I think makes the most sense. So let's call this the shoot key. And we're not checking a keyboard function. Now we're checking a mouse button. So there's a similar function to keyboard check, which is mouse check button. And then we need to put in a constant for our left mouse button, which would be MB_left for mouse button left. And now we have a shooting key. And remember, we're going to use mouse check button and not mouse check button pressed. Okay? It's very important, and you'll see why. Okay, so let's add the actual shooting code. First, I think I might clean this up just a tiny bit. So I might put the player aiming inside the sprite control for now. You don't have to do this. It's just kind of bothering me that it's just kind of floating out there. So I'm going to put it like, I'm just going to do this, tab all of these things out just to make them all a little bit more separated. And then I'm just going to get rid of the old code here. So I didn't change anything. I just moved the aiming into this region here so I can close it now, make everything look nice. And yeah, okay, so now let's move on to the shooting code. So let's say shoot the weapon. So first of all, we only want to shoot whenever we're actually pressing the shoot key, right? So we need to say if shoot key, then we can run this code. And the first thing that we want to get down is actually creating the bullet and giving it the correct direction, our player's aiming direction. So when you create an object in GameMaker, as I mentioned in the beginning, it is technically called an instance of that object, and every instance has its own unique identifier in GameMaker whenever they're created. It's called an instance ID and is completely unique to that single instance. That way you can reference it and manipulate it from other objects or in any way you need to. So you can use a function like instance create depth, any of the instance create functions. And first of all, let's just go ahead and put in, we'll say we want to create this bullet at our player's X and our player's center Y. We'll just start it from the middle of the player. It's going to look a little weird, but that's just where we'll start off. And then we move on down here and it says we need a certain depth to create it at. In our bullet, we're probably going to set it dynamically like we did with our player, but for now we can just say depth minus 100. That'll just mean that it shows up on top of the player. And then lastly, what object do we want to create? Well, we obviously want to create our bullet object. So, as I was saying, we can create an instance of an object with an instance create function, but what it also does is this function returns the specific identifier for the new instance of our bullet object. So we can actually store that like this. We can store it in any kind of variable. So let's do a local variable, and we'll call this underscore bullet inst equals this. So what we're doing with this one line of code is we are creating an instance of a bullet object. So we're creating a bullet and we're storing that specific identifier for it in this local variable. And now that means we can access that bullet object and change some stuff in it, like its direction. So let's say change the bullet's direction. Oops. We can do that like this. We can say with, and then in parentheses, we put our bullet instance, and then we can open up some curly brackets. Now, whenever we use with, that means that we are going inside of this other instance. So now any code between here, we need to write as if we were writing it inside that specific bullet object. Again, this isn't editing all the bullet objects, it's just editing the single instance that we just created. So now I can set the direction of this singular bullet object to the aim direction of the player. But like I said, we're technically inside of the new instance right now. So we can't just say aim direction because this variable has not been set inside of our bullet object. We need to access back to our object player. So we can do that by saying other dot aim direction like this. Other basically just refers to whenever you're doing something like this, whenever you're working inside a certain object from inside another object, then you can use other. So what this is saying is check the object player's aim direction and set our new bullet instance's direction to that aiming direction. So that should do it. This should create a new bullet and shoot it in the right way. So let's try that out. So if I press my shoot button, oh yeah, look at that. Wow. See, now you probably noticed this is pretty crazy. Now don't go too crazy yet. Stop shooting. Stop. I know it's probably fun, but you need to quit because we've clearly got some issues. Okay, so let's list off the many issues we have right here. This is very cool. First of all, congratulate yourself. Have a sip of water. Do a jumping jack. Okay? Okay, now we need to list all of the things that are issues. So we'll do what we did last time. We'll start from most obvious to least obvious. First of all, this is way too fast, and it's way too many bullets. This default weapon we're making is supposed to kind of be like the normal one, like the pistol type bullet, right? So, you know, maybe I can't even shoot one at a time. It's so difficult. But yeah, so we got too many. They shoot too frequently, and that's an issue. Second most noticeable issue is if you look at our player, the bullet does not come from the end of the weapon. It comes from the center of the player. So we need to kind of incorporate an offset into that to make it come out of the tip of the weapon. And then the last thing that is the least noticeable but most dangerous is we know that our bullets are supposed to destroy on the projectile wall, which is true. They are right now. The red wall is destroying them, and the yellow wall is not, which is important. However, where do you think these bullets are going? The ones that don't get destroyed whenever they touch this? Where do you think they're going? Off screen, yes. But what are they doing after that? They are still going. Every single one of these bullets that I'm shooting off screen is still out there. It still exists. None of them have been destroyed because we haven't told the game to destroy them yet. So this can cause big boy problems for you pretty quickly. For you and maybe for players who don't have super high-end PCs or are just using little cheap laptops or something like that, it probably will not take long at all for your game to start slowing down massively and eventually probably just freezing and crashing entirely and slowing down your whole computer. So we need to make sure that no matter what, even if they don't actually hit anything, that these bullets actually go away on their own. And so we're actually going to do what we did last time again, and we're going to solve these in reverse order because we absolutely need to start with the fact that these bullets don't destroy themselves, which can have huge ramifications on your game and its performance. So all that code is going to be handled in our bullet. So let's go to our bullet again. And so now we want a new condition for being destroyed. And what I've decided makes the most sense is we want to tell our bullet that it needs to have a maximum distance that it can travel before it gets rid of itself. So let's actually add 2 more things, and we're going to add it in a little section that I'm just going to call cleanup. So first of all, let's add a max dist variable for maximum distance it can go. Now, just for testing's sake, I want to make it pretty small so I can actually see that it's getting rid of itself. So let's do like 80, really small distance. They won't go far. And then let's add another variable called destroy, and we'll set this equal to false. Because if you remember what I mentioned here, let's go ahead and go into our step event. I mentioned that when it comes to destroying our bullets, we were going to get a little bit more complicated because there are certain things we need to consider. So let me show you what we're going to do instead of just calling instance destroy anytime we need to destroy it. So I'm actually going to add a new section over here, and I'm also going to call this cleanup. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of abstract the destruction of this bullet into its own little flag. And we're going to do that by saying destroy equals true. True. So now we can go under this and add our destruction code. And so we can say if destroy is equal to true, then now we do the instance destroy. So we can test this really quick before we do anything else and just make sure that it's doing exactly what it's supposed to, which it is. It's destroying itself in the exact same way that it was before. There's a few advantages to this, but first let's add our bullets out of range code. Then I'll explain why we did the destroy thing. So we have our variable that has the maximum distance our bullet should be able to travel. Now how do we calculate how far the bullet has actually traveled? Well, we can use our point distance function that we've used before, and we can use some really handy built-in variables in GameMaker. So these are called xstart and ystart, and basically whenever a new instance is created in GameMaker, whether it was something you put in the room editor or it was something you created dynamically like we did in our player object creating these bullets, each object remembers where it was first created in the room. So we can just basically use the starting point of when our object was created with our current x and y coordinates, and we can say if that distance is greater than our maximum distance, then once again we can flag it to be destroyed. Oops. And that's it. So let's test that really quick and make sure it's working. Okay, great. Look at that. It only goes so far, and so that means that no matter how far I made it, so if now I made it like say 240, now it can go pretty far off the screen, and I could make that even higher. I could make it 500 and make sure that no matter what, they pretty much always went off the screens. But I would know that they're actually getting destroyed and that there aren't just thousands and thousands of bullets off screen eating up processing power. So good, that works. We've solved that first problem. And like I said, we've kind of introduced another good thing. There are 2 reasons that we want to have destroy be its own little flag here. First of all, if you have some kind of visual or something like a little explosion visual or a little bullet bursting visual or something like that, that you want to happen whenever the bullet is destroyed, you could create that visual right here in this little bit of code and then destroy it. So anytime it's been flagged for destruction, it'll always run all this code, so you can always tell it to make the little explosion visual or something like that, which we actually will be doing later, so that's good. It's kind of the same principle as why we made draw my weapon its own function. So that way, whenever it's drawing in front or behind the player, we only have to edit what's happening in one place, even though we kind of have multiple scenarios in which we want to use this. Because you can think we're probably going to have to add things like, certain bullets are going to be destroyed when they run into solid walls. Certain bullets are going to be destroyed when they get out of range. Certain ones are going to be destroyed when they hit enemies. Maybe some have a timer. So who knows? It could be anything. This just ensures that we can put all that in a single block of code. And here is the actual much, much more important reason that we want to do this. The much, much more important reason that we want to do this is because we actually don't want it down here. We want it up here. We want the destroy code to trigger above anywhere where we tell the bullet to destroy itself.
Okay, hello.
recording this way after I recorded the original series, so if I sound a little bit different, it's because I'm sick and it's later. But I wasn't super happy about how I was kind of describing this process. I could only think of like complicated edits to get my point across, so I figured I'd kind of just make it in the actual project and kind of walk you through the steps really quick of why we're making this decision. So first, let me tell you what you're looking at. At the top here is just kind of the simulation of the game. This is a simulation of like the player shooting a bullet at a crate, which a crate is a wall object, obviously. Bullets can run into it and the player can run into it, but it's also like an enemy. In our game, there's a little bit of a spoiler, but whenever we get to damaging the enemies, what we're going to do is the enemy is going to check for the bullets and if it's being hit, and then it's going to take the damage. And we're using that same exact script whenever we eventually do like breakable terrain like this. So this thing is functioning as a solid wall and an enemy at the same time with like HP and health. I was going to use an enemy as an example, but this just makes a lot more sense to me. So that's what this top part is. And this bottom part is kind of showing you like when the game is running and it's running a single frame of the game and it's running through all the code, the order of operations it's kind of going in. I've skipped a lot of events, but I'm just showing you the 3-step events. But obviously here you get the begin step, the step event, and then the end step event. And so for the game to compile, we're running through all the events before here, and then we're getting to the main step event where the bullet object and the crates and enemies and stuff, the bulk of the code that we've been doing is in the step event. So this is where pretty much all the objects of our game sort of sit, and they all run their code in this regular step event. And then we move on to the end step event for, any objects that have an end step event. And then we move on to the draw and stuff like that. And then we wrap back around for the next frame of the game. And then we start the loop back over, and then we get to the next step. So let me explain to you really quick why this is important. Even though both the bullet object and the crate in this instance are in the step event, it doesn't necessarily all run at once at the same time. There actually still is an order here. So pretty much everything gets queued into the step event, and then it runs on that level. So these two aren't running code at the same time. They're actually running code one after another, and it sort of just depends on when they were created or whatever GameMaker is deciding to do, which one needs to be run first. And so if we were to go up to our little simulation here, we would shoot the bullet, and then it makes contact with this crate object. Now in our bullet object code, before we moved the destroy code, what would happen was the bullet would say, okay, I just touched a wall, so I need to destroy myself. And that's what it would do. It would get rid of itself like that, right? But remember, this object still needs to take damage from that bullet. So if we're going down here and we're progressing through the steps of the game, we're going this way and then it's looping back, and then we're coming this way and then looping back and coming this way. If the code for the bullet technically runs first before the code of the crate receiving damage from the bullet, what's going to happen is the bullet is going to destroy itself, and by the time it gets back to the crate won't even know that a bullet was ever there, because the bullet's already gone, so the crate can't take damage from it because it's just not there anymore. So you can kind of see that's why what we want to do is, so when we get to this point, whenever we touch the crate, instead of the bullet immediately destroying itself, it says, okay, now I'm ready to be destroyed. The next time we loop back around, but not quite yet, not this frame. So what happens is it says, I'm ready to be destroyed, but the bullet is still here. Now the code for the crate can run, and it says, okay, there's a bullet touching me, so I need to take some damage. It takes its damage, we cycle back to the next frame of the game, and now before we do anything else with the bullet, it says, oh, I was told last frame that I need to be destroyed. So then it destroys itself. And to avoid doubling up any damage from for our enemies and our crates, don't worry, we have a full system for that. It's built into the damage system, so nothing will ever take double damage, and this way everything will make sure it does take damage. This would be pretty similar if we ran the collision check code here and we flagged it to be destroyed, and then we put the destruction code in the end step event, so it would still have time to interact with the crate, and you could also put it in the begin step event, so it loops back around. It would all do the same thing. To be honest with you, it's been a while since I recorded it and I tested everything. I'm pretty sure I kept it in the step event for a reason instead of putting it into an end or begin step event. I think there was maybe a tiny little bug with putting it in the end step event, so I would just say keep following the videos as closely as possible. But hopefully that was a good explanation for you. Hopefully that really clarified what's going on there and what the benefit of that decision was. Okay, thank you. And then the game will loop back around for just a single frame, and then it knows it needs to be destroyed. And if I run the game and show it to you, there's basically no difference. You can see that the bullet actually gets like one single frame farther, but it's not really a huge deal. And if you didn't want it to move anymore, you could even, go into your movement code here and, say if destroy is equal to false, then do the movement code. You can tell it not to move anymore, but I don't think it's a problem. I think it looks fine, and I think it even looks a little bit better having it actually go into the object just a little bit. It makes it look like it actually impacts a little bit more than it did in the first place. So, but you see that it's all working still, all working fine, and that means eventually it's going to make calculating damage from our enemies and stuff like that a lot easier. Hopefully I made sense of that and didn't confuse the issue too much. But yeah, so that was the first problem solved, along with another thing that we needed to do anyways. So before we move on, I'm just going to clean all this up a little bit. I'm going to put this all in one line like this. I'm going to put all of this on one line, and I'm going to put all of this on one line. Okay, I like that a little bit more. Okay, the next of our major issues. The next one was the fact that the bullets shoot from the middle of the player's body instead of the end of the weapon. So let's figure that out. We're going to use the same principle that we used in the draw my weapon function here with these offsets, right? We used our weapon offset to kind of push it forward a little bit. We're going to use the exact same principle to find out where we need to spawn our bullet, which also means that we need to find the appropriate distance we need. First of all, we need our weapon offset distance, and we need the length of our weapon, right? Those two added together. So we need to make a new variable called weapon length, and just gonna put 0 for default really quick, and I'll show you how we can figure this out. First of all, you can just open your weapon, and you can just kind of count pixels, how we did with, getting the center Y offset for our player. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. So you can do that. That's cool. Or here's a little trick that I like. Go to your collision mask, and you see I've already done it, but I've set my collision mask to manual so I can drag it around, and I've just dragged the end of it to about where I want the bullets to spawn. So about right here, because we can just calculate how long this collision mask is with a simple function, and that'll automatically determine it for us, which would be very useful if I say I was just looking at this and I was like, you know what, I actually kind of want this gun to be a little bit shorter. I could change the image, and then I could just drag this back, and my code will change along with it. So I'm gonna put this about right here. The length is really all that matters. The height doesn't matter. This could be anything. But now I can go here, and I could say the weapon length is going to be sprite get bbox right, not mode, sorry. Sprite get bbox right. And the sprite we're going to check for is our weapon sprite. That's going to be the S blue rod, and that's the length we need. Basically what this function does is it finds the offset of your collision mask based on the top left of the sprite itself. So it goes from here all the way to here that it's measuring. And same if we did the function for bbox top, it would be this distance to here. For bottom, this distance to here. And for the left one, it would be 0 since they're on the same area. Now this works because we have set the origin to be all the way to the left of the image anyways. So this distance will always be correct if we do that. Now, if you messed around and you put your origin somewhere else on your weapon because you wanted it to pivot from another point, you can either just count the pixels, or you can also do this function. And I believe if you just did minus sprite x offset, then that would also give you the correct number. Okay, I did something kind of dumb. My brain's getting a little fried, so I wasn't thinking. Sprite x offset is obviously a variable that belongs to the object player. So this is going to be the x offset of the player's sprite. We need to, once again, use a function like this. We need to use sprite get x offset, and then we need to do that of this sprite again, okay? My bad, I overlooked that. So you're gonna see whenever I run the game in a second that this doesn't work out for me. So yeah, just make sure you change it to this instead if you want to use it. Okay, see you later. If we did it right now, it would also give us the correct number because our sprite x offset is 0, because the origin of our sprite is pressed up against the left of the image of itself anyways. So yeah, if the origin of your sprite is not all the way on the left side of the image, then you can add this in and that will help. You know, I'll just keep it in anyways, just in case. It won't hurt anything. It is a little bit of extra calculation, which is unnecessary, but it doesn't really matter. Don't matter. So anyways, now we have the length of our weapon. And remember, we have our weapon offset, which is kind of like the arm offset, which maybe I should have called that variable that anyways, but who cares? So now back to our step event where we were shooting. And like I said, we need to do what we did in the draw my weapon with these offsets. So we need to make these offsets again and basically do the same thing. So I'm going to say var x offset. I'm going to set that equal to length direction x. And the distance we're going to use is obviously our weapon length plus our weapon offset distance. And then we're going to have it be offset by our aiming direction. And then we need to do the same thing for the y offset, length direction y. Remember that, not x again. Weapon length plus weapon offset distance and aim direction again. So great. Let's do the same thing one more time and just add them back in. X offset plus y offset. So this should give us pretty much what we're looking for. Oops, and it didn't. Okay, I fixed it. That was dumb of me. But, you know, you already knew that because you already watched the video. So yeah, anyways, if you do it the correct way, then this is what it looked like. There it is. A magical bullets coming out of the magical rod. Perfect. And if you want them to start off farther, then all you need to do now is just go in here to your collision mask and just kind of pull this out more. So like maybe up there. And yeah, you know, just push this out a little bit more. It's cool. It's all cool. So I'm going to put it back about right here. I think that's where I kind of like it. Yeah, that's pretty good. So yeah, okay. And just really quick, I'll just show you that for mine, this bit of code isn't even needed in the first place. Same thing. But like I said, I'll keep it in. So we've solved 2 of our issues now. Now our final issue is the rapid fire issue. We should not be rapidly firing at that rate. And the easiest way to stop that from happening is to introduce a timer, our own timer. So let's do that. Let's go back to the create event. I'm going to put this under weapon info, but kind of in its own little thing. Call this shoot timer. Set it equal to 0. And then I'm going to add a variable called shoot cooldown. And this will be how many frames does it take to cool down. Now, when you think of cooldowns in games, you might think of really long, like 10-second long things. Like, no, we can just do it. I'm going to do 9 frames. Very simple. Very short amount of time. But as we're currently shooting a bullet every single frame, this will be 9 times slower. So that'll help us out a bit. Again, you can, for all of your weapons and bullets and stuff like that, you're going to change this time for each one, I'm sure. And you might not even like this one on its own. But here's how we're going to do it. So let's go back to our step event. And first, we want to check. Let's say if we're pressing our shooting button and our shoot timer is less than or equal to 0, which means the timer is ready, then we can shoot the bullet. But we also need to reset the timer. So we need to set our shoot timer to the cooldown. So cool. If we shoot the key, we set our shoot timer to 9 in this case. So now it is no longer equal to 0, which means that it won't keep shooting until our timer is 0 again. And the last thing we need to do is just make sure that the timer actually does count itself down. So we will say right above here, if our shoot timer is greater than 0, then we can say shoot timer minus minus. And minus minus just means every single frame we will subtract 1. So it would be the same as saying minus equals 1. Same thing. And again, I did this on a single line of code just to make it look nice, but if you want to, feel free to, do it all out like this, whichever works better for you. They do the same thing. I'm just going to put it all back on the one line though, just because I like that with really simple lines of code like this that only do one thing. So anyways, yeah, as long as we're pressing the shooting button and the timer is less than or equal to 0, which it should never be less than 0, but why not just throw the less than in there? It shoots a bullet, it puts the cooldown back up, and then we have to wait for it to tick down again. So let's see what that does. Yeah, look at that. Now that is a much more, I think, reasonable stream, right? Okay, cool. So yeah, look at that. We've solved all of our issues here. Now I'm sure whenever we initially added up here the mouse check button for the shoot key, I'm sure some of you just went ahead and fixed the issue yourself by changing this from mouse check button to mouse check button pressed. Because like I explained earlier, pressed, it only registers for a frame. So if I were to press the left mouse button and hold it down, it would only register for a single frame until I lifted my finger off and pressed it down again, right? And that could be totally valid for some games. However, the cooldown system is kind of important here, because if you just did it with the shoot key and you were just checking for it to be pressed, in fact, let me show you really quick. So you don't need to change anything, but I'm just going to show you real quick and get rid of this stuff. So now we're only checking for if the button has been pressed instead of being held down, right? So if I press it once and hold it, that's all that happens. So you can shoot like this, which seems like it fixes it, and it definitely fixes the issue of just having way too many. However, I can still do this, and that's still shooting way more bullets than I want the player to be able to shoot at that speed. And you think, oh, that might be fun because pressing buttons is fun, and pressing them fast is pretty fun. I agree, it is fun. And for your game, it might be the way to do it. However, one, this can be pretty fatiguing to players if there's no kind of cooldown. So a player knows that if they're just going absolutely ham like that, then they're probably going to get themselves tired pretty quick. And another thing is, whenever you think about adding new types of weapons, say one of your weapons is a pistol type weapon that's like this, that might not be too bad for the rate of fire for it. However, what if one of them is like a shotgun weapon that's really powerful in close range? That's way too fast to be shooting a shotgun. It's going to be extremely difficult for you to balance a game like that. Again, it can be fun. Never say never. So if that's what you want to do, then you need to go for it. But whenever you talk about certain things in game design like dominant strategy, people are always going to gravitate towards the path of least resistance. At least a lot of players are. And if that path is very easy to find, which is selecting the shotgun and just absolutely spamming the shotgun, then what other reason is there going to be to use different types of guns? And if that's the case, if players aren't going to use different types of guns, then what's the point of you making any more, you know? What's the point of you making any other weapons? So again, maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe you just want to have a shotgun that you could shoot at any rate. And if that's the case, then I say just make that one gun with all the stuff that you learned in this tutorial. And you also might be saying, well, yeah, but I could also have the button press be the bullet, and I could put in the cooldown like you did. This is completely true. So now the player can press the button but can't spam it faster than they're supposed to. If you want to do that, that's cool too. That's totally fine. I think that's slightly better than the version that we just had. However, now if you want to be more kind to your player, if you want to let them relax their arm a little bit more, a player pressing the button to shoot with this cooldown time is never going to shoot it as efficiently as if they were just holding the button, and the moment the cooldown was done, it let them shoot, right? So in this game that I'm making right now, there's not going to be a bullet limit. There's not going to be ammunition or anything like that. I'll show you how to do that. It's very, very, very easy to do. And in a game where managing ammo is more important, then you probably want to make it to where it's just at the button press and not holding the button, because you don't want players to accidentally waste ammo. That's totally fine. But for this game, you saw how I was demoing it at the beginning of the series where you can just shoot all the time. This system, to me, makes the most sense. The system can get a little strange when it comes to any weapons that have like a super long cooldown. It can feel a little awkward to press the shoot button and miss it because there was a really long cooldown range. So this system does work best with cooldowns that are, you know, under half a second or something like that. But yeah, again, I'm just showing you as many different ways to do stuff as I can. You need to make the decision for your own game. If you want to do something pretty different than this, I'm going to try and give you the best amount of information and strategies that I can for you to actually make this stuff. And if you're just following me, then that's the explanation why I chose to do it this way. And hopefully you understand why, and it can help you get to thinking about your game and maybe your new games that you want to make after this. So anyways, I'm going to clean this up one more time. I'm going to maybe add both of these under the group of just actual shooting, tab them out like that. And yeah, okay. So now that we have everything in place, let's just go ahead and make a second weapon. Because now that everything is where it needs to be, I can show you how to do things like swapping weapons and have all these systems work dynamically. Because I'm sure you've noticed, how am I supposed to get all this stuff to work with multiple different weapons? It kind of seems like it's all built for one, especially when you think of like our draw event that literally just straight up lists the sprite of a singular weapon. Well, you're right. It is only currently working for one. However, we've secretly set it up to where we can very easily just edit a couple things and have it to where we can just plug in any information that we want. Okay, thank you so much for watching. The next video is a really important one to go with this one. It's all about weapon variety, so it's all about us making a system that makes it super, super easy to just make tons of different types of weapons with very minimal effort. I show you how to make different types of bullets, and then we talk about how to actually like swap between weapons and stuff like that, which is pretty important for this kind of game, I think. So yeah, that'll be cool. And then the one after that, we actually start talking about enemies and how we can damage things with our bullet objects. So that'll be a cool one too. Mostly because it can go a little bit more in depth than you might think, so stick around. You'll definitely learn something. Like I said in the intro, feel free to wishlist my game on Steam, Starcross Arcade Special. There's a link in the description. And certainly check out my Patreon, who now has a lot of really cool people supporting, and some especially cool people from that Patreon are Nixionic, Red Dragon Redemption, Null, Joseph Sandlin, Midnight, Jerica Deloge, Mark, Aogio, Homeless Bums Ahoy, Skellen Thrax, Captain Ludwig, and Christian Donovan. Thank you guys so much. It absolutely means the world to me. And thank you so much to all my other patrons as well. You guys are awesome. But yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.